Hokie hangover. The boys are back. The boys are back in town. Yes, we are. It is time for us to take a look at this 2025 season, guys. We're here with Mike McDaniel, Andrew Alex. Mike, you done with that Jolly Rancher yet?
Working on it. Working on it.
Andrew, welcome back. You've had quite the travels so far this summer.
Yeah, it's we're getting to the end of it. I got for those of you who know my boy Nathan Brennan, he is getting married this weekend, of which I am the best man. But after a long, excruciating year of just traveling, the only plans I'll have left the rest of the way are going to have college football at the center of them, which is it's an exciting place to be in life.
Does Mike have any college football plans for this year?
Like for a game?
Yeah.
Is Tech making a bowl game?
The road to 6-6 begins in what, 20 days now?
That tweet went triple platinum, man. And I was not expecting it to. I was just getting my jokes off. But
sometimes it's the simple ones that carry the greatest message to the people.
I looked this morning and I was like, wait, what in the world is that? I saw all these, like hundreds of likes, and I was like, what is happening? I was like, it wasn't that funny, was it? I guess it was.
I made a Penn State joke on X that I thought would go viral, and it did not perform whatsoever. I was quite disappointed. So you never really know what's going to trend on this damn platform.
You don't.
All right, boys, before we get into looking at this offense, which is quite different than what it was last year, friend of the pod, I think, definitely friend of Andrew's, Doug Bowman from VT Scoop at 247. He out-journalismed the journalists on this one, boys. He found the Board of Visitors presentation scheduled for August 18th to be given by Whit Babcock. This is a lengthy presentation. First, if you haven't seen it, go to, I want to make sure I credit him properly, at Doug Bowman 247 on X. You can find the entire presentation slides available on his profile. He did an excellent job uncovering this and going through it slide by slide. This is an incredibly detailed presentation looking at all sorts of aspects of college athletics as it pertains to financing, how it pertains to Virginia Tech, and how Virginia Tech is going to fare down the road, and what some possible solutions are. Andrew, when you first saw this, what was kind of your initial takeaway from this? And I guess, what were your thoughts on maybe some of the solutions that were proposed?
Yeah, I mean, my initial thought upon looking at the presentation is it's kind of a call to the powers that be and a plea for, financial and just generally, a higher level of institutional support at what is a crossroads for the sport, and how it's going to realign, how it has realigned, and how it's going to continue to realign, and the impact that will have on, the university's finances and their ability to compete at a high level, and what that means for the institution as a whole. I thought that was, and you can see that the almost plea aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
When he goes right to the marketing value of the football team, mentioning the spike in applications for Southern Methodist this year after making the college football playoff, and saying, look, like, I know your priority might be, academics in the university at number one, but let's refocus here. And that's going to have a trickle-down economics effect on the university as a whole that's going to benefit everybody. So, whether these conversations have been had before, if this is the first time it's seriously being addressed, perhaps that's too little too late, and perhaps that's a lot of reason why Virginia Tech's in the position that they are right now. But, I guess it's a reality check that, I think that at least I'm comfortable knowing that everyone in that room and the powers that be in Whit or in Merriman are aware of that, including Whit at the top. But again, could it be too little too late? I do not know.
That was my thing, Andrew, was that it was nice to see that they seemingly have identified the issues here. But like Andrew said, Mike, this feels like it's like 5 years too far gone. I mean, I know that the lockdowns and the pandemic had it just an incredible impact on institutions across the country, and there's no disputing that. But I feel like this presentation could have been given in 2021 or even 2022, and it would have been just as relevant.
I have a different take. First of all, I agree with all that, but I have a different take. Is there a chance that Whit laying all of this out right now is a precursor to him trying to save his own job?
Absolutely. Yes.
That's
I think you're spot on there.
That
Well,
was my takeaway.
At the end of the day, you have to look at everything. Every decision Whit Babcock makes at this point is with an eye to keep his job. I mean,
Calculated. Right. That's the way that's kind of what I took it as. Everybody's like, this is too little, too late. Oh, wow, this part's interesting. This part's not. Oh, this should have been done a long time ago. I agree with a lot of different takes on this, but the one I haven't seen yet is there a chance that he's laying all this out right now in great detail to prove his worth to the university? Right. He's been the athletic director for a decade.
It's crazy to think he's been here that long.
Yeah, he's Babcock and Sansa are something like the second or third longest tenured like AD president duo in the Power Five. Like they've been around a while, and the fan base is obviously like grown pretty tired of Whit Babcock, I think, at this point. And some of that's fair. I think some of it is probably not so fair. Depending on how you look at it. The one thing that's obviously true is that the football program is not going to, if you take it seriously enough, you're not going to allow your athletic director to obviously hire a third head coach for football. So a lot of it just hinges on how Pride does anyway. But my take on this is I think he's trying to prove his worth to university, prove that he's the guy who can carry Virginia Tech into like this era of revenue sharing, kind of prove that he's the right guy for the job, which I think at the end of the day really just hinges on how Pride does. But that was kind of my take on it, is like, this is really detailed. I think it's pretty well done. I think the research is pretty clear here. Obviously a lot went into this. So I commend him and his team for putting this together and for that, and trying to get Virginia Tech in a better spot financially for this new era in college football, and for revenue sharing as a whole. But that was my whole take. It was almost like just proving your worth, and we'll kind of see where things fall, right? But I do think it's a little too late, but you know, we'll see how things go.
I mean, in terms of the realignment of the conferences, it might be too little too late. You know, obviously some of these changes would have had to have been made years ago, like even before college football changed the landscape that it is right now, just because that gave teams such a heavy head start in the era that, you know, the cards have kind of fallen as they may to this point. Now, granted, anything's possible, but he's basically saying, here are the different scenarios. They're going to play out quickly. We need to get ahead now. And if winning games and generating national attention is something that's important to the university, like, here's what we're going to need to make it happen. And again, it does feel somewhat too little too late. And you have to wonder when, if it was even necessary, some of these conversations were being had at other institutions. But it's kind of the facts on the ground. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I feel like we've been overridden with these big initiatives and floods of donations and apparent changes of strategy, which, you know, I don't know all the inside baseball of it, but it certainly hasn't translated to a ton more wins on the field at this point, and that's kind of what everyone cares about. So, so you know, it's I don't want to say I'm sick of it, because you never want them to stop trying. You don't want them to obviously give up, but yeah, I'm curious to see what, if any, big announcements of that sort are made in this 2025, 2026, academic athletic calendar.
Yeah, I think for me the two things that I was most intrigued by were these future revenue solutions, and the two things here that caught my eye the most, one of which we've talked about before, considering the impact of the Metallica concert, the special events facility utilization
Yeah.
and trying to find ways to capitalize on this giant venue that you have on campus in Lane Stadium and how you can potentially monetize that more than 6 or 7 times a year. I think that is a critical aspect of this. And I do hope, as I've said before, that that's a strategy that this department, regardless who is leading it, employs. I think it's a really valuable one. The other one here is the mixed use real estate aspect. And this is something that uh, other like pro teams have done in places. The obvious one is, I think, Titletown is what it's called in Green Bay, that the Packers own. You have the surrounding area for the Atlanta Braves in their new stadium. These are things that more and more more and more organizations, whether it be professional or college, are starting to do when it comes to building out these new arenas. And there's a fair amount of land around Lane Stadium that you could potentially develop, some of which is a parking lot at the moment. But these are probably ways that Virginia Tech is going to have to really dive headfirst into if they want to elevate themselves financially and be able to keep up, or at least try and mitigate this gap that is ever increasing with what has become now like the Power Two or the Super Two, and where the ACC is.
A lot of these middle ground teams need to find a way to be competitive, right? They got to find, the ones that don't have the donor base. I'm just thinking through it, like Texas Tech's getting a lot of hype this year because of what they spent on their roster, and they've always had.
No, Mike, it's because they love Lubbock.
They've always had a donor base. I was actually listening to Cover 3 today, and they were talking about how Texas Tech staff, they had to pay a premium, right, to get those kids to come to Lubbock. They had to pay maybe, 15, 20, 25% more for a kid than a Georgia or Texas would have to pay, to get them to go to school there, which is interesting. But it's interesting because like Texas Tech's been a middle of the pack school in college football for quite a long time. I mean, it's been a while since, it was Graham Harrell and Michael Crabtree. It's been a minute, and they've been a middle of the road program for a really long time, especially after Leach left. And I don't know. Obviously Tech doesn't have the types of donors to compete with the oil money in Texas, but Texas Tech notwithstanding, like a lot of schools in that middle ground need to find a way to be competitive, find new ways to, have those revenue streams for roster retention now. And I just don't know. What Virginia Tech's going to do. I think, opening up Lane Stadium is like a multi-use, venue is a good idea. I think building on the land around you, right, that the university already owns, could be an intriguing option down the line. I think that's probably a long shot that happens, but like it's an idea. I just don't really know. It's scary looking at what Virginia Tech's spending versus some of these other ACC schools. It's scary. There's, an expectation with the fan base, right? And then it's what you're actually spending to be good. And there's a gap there. And they got to find a way to fill that gap.
They do. And, there's nuance to the conversation, right? Because obviously Virginia Tech does not have the resources that some of their peers do. And that's obvious. But like I wrote about earlier this offseason, like based on the last 3 years, 4 years, the Hokies have enough resources on the football side to at least get to the top 25. There are programs that are in the top 25 every year that are far below Virginia Tech when it comes to football outputs when it comes to what they're actually spending in these expenditures. They're way off. And there are other programs in the top 25, obviously, that are far above Virginia Tech. So it's important to acknowledge that that gap exists between some of those upper echelon programs, while also being able to acknowledge that based on the on-field results, it doesn't seem like Virginia Tech is getting their money's worth.
I agree.
I mean that would be evident. But I mean, at the end of the day, right? It's we could look at two problems that happen at the same time, right? Like you can fail to maximize the resources that you currently have when it comes to on-field winning and losing, and you can have the realization that even what you're doing right now, though it should be good enough to do better than what you're doing right now, if kept at this level, will spell certain doom and potential irrelevance going forward as those gaps continue to widen. So, yeah, step one is increase the, the arsenal of assets that you have around you to facilitate winning. And step two is actually do it, right? And we've seen in the past that increases in one doesn't necessarily lead to those on-field results. But again, all you could do is try, and it is nice to see, even when it comes to like the mixed use stuff, where they're talking about upgrading the stadium, the acknowledgments that being run like a mom and pop shop is now almost certain to yield mom and pop level results. Yeah. It's good to see them looking forward. It is good to see them looking forward. The question is like, what does it matter when other teams are 7 steps ahead of you, and now, everyone's you're late to the party, and you're competing with other people who are late to the party. People are going to be moving in this direction if they actually care about winning. And some schools are already 5-6 steps ahead of you. It's going to be an extreme challenge. And I guess I would like to look into the eyes, or not the eyes, the eyes and the mind of Whit Babcock, of Tim Sands, and get their honest thought. What does success look like to you? What would, from 2028 to 2034, when the media rights deal starts to break up, and I think you see probably the last chance at flexibility for Virginia Tech to adjust. What do you deem success looking like between then and now to make you feel well positioned? I'd be curious to hear Whit's answer. I'd be curious to hear Sand's honest answer, because it would tell you how much he actually cares. But because I don't know that answer myself. I don't know what I feel like should be good enough. I just root for the team to do as well as possible. Currently, I root for them to win more than 6 games. That would seem like a step in the right direction. But I'm curious what that target looks like. What does success look like for these guys right now?
And does it need to be, the fan base doesn't want to hear this, but like, do expectations need to be tempered a little bit based on where Virginia Tech is at currently in the new revenue sharing era? Like, and I'm not saying to not try to be competitive. I don't want people to take it that way. I don't want everybody coming at me in my mentions, because that happens. That's not what I mean. But like, just from, I think fans need to have an understanding that it is not the early to mid 2000s anymore. Like, it's very, very, the whole landscape's very different. Yeah, Virginia Tech's different, certainly, but like the whole landscape's really different. And what it takes to be successful now is a lot different than what it took 20 years ago. I mean, it's just really, really hard to win now if you're 80% of the sport, at least winning the way that I think maybe some fan bases are used to in the past. It's just different. conferences are different, scheduling's different, how players are paid is different. Recruiting
Not in
is
the
way
McDonald's
different.
bag in the locker anymore.
Right. It's just way different. It's way different. So we'll see what this ends up being down the line. I know some people got really frustrated with my road to 6-6 tweet. That was a joke. I mean, it was a joke. A lot of, there were some older
was
fans,
it?
I think, upset. There's a shred of truth in everything. And like, I think this team is going to be around 6-6, not to like spoil things for the season preview later, but like, this is kind of what it feels like. It's a lot of turnover and we'll see. But this is what this program has been too. Like, this is what they've been, Tech hasn't won more than 6 regular season games since 2019. They've only won more than 6 regular season games 3 times in the last decade. This is what this program is right now and has been for 10 years. We're adding more and more data points to it every year that this program's mediocre. So yeah, some stuff needs to change. It's like complicated and it's not. The players that are here just need to play better. The coaching that's here needs to coach better, some of it is as simple as that, but other stuff is not, right? Like, and I don't think too, and I think this is a nuanced conversation too, because it's when I say it's hard to win now, I don't mean that it's hard to win 7 or 8 games. That's not what I mean. I mean, it's hard to like compete for national championships. It's hard to compete for conference titles on a consistent basis, even in the ACC. It's hard. It's harder now. That's what I mean. I think the portions of the fan base, like you guys, like me, who think Virginia Tech should perennially be like an 8-win program, and every few years be a little bit better than that. I think that's a very reasonable expectation for what this program had been in the past, what this program could be now, even with all the changes in the sport. I think it's totally reasonable to expect that. But to win big to the level that some fans expect, like, oh, is this going to be a program that's competing for national titles? It's going to win 10 games every year. That's going to, be in the college football playoff conversation every year. Things need to change. And a lot of it is laid out in Whit's presentation. So that's kind of the state of where we're at currently, right? And could it improve? Yes. Is there going to be a road to get there? Yes. Is it an easy road to get there? I don't think it is. I think it's difficult to win the way that I think some fans want to. So.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, Mike. And I just want to say that anyone who doesn't find humor in your 6-6 tweet, it's like, have you been living under a rock? Like, you must not care that much,
right?
Because it's totally what this team has been. It's hilarious at this point. But Beamer finished out with a bunch of 500 seasons. Fuente was plagued with them. And it's the best Pry has done in 3 tries so far, and the only other one has been worse. So, like, yeah.
Yep.
So again, it's amazing, but a lot of teams, and if you're a young Virginia Tech fan, this is the maybe the mental block that you have. And I say young, I mean like you could be like 33 or 34 at this point, but not every team associates their rivalry game with being needed to make a bowl in the last week of the season.
Yeah.
Every time. I mean, it usually works out. In fact, it almost always works out. But it's just it's comical at this point because it's consistently true. So I don't know. It's again, if you can't laugh at Mike's joke, I don't know what planet you're living on.
Yeah. No, exactly right.
Yeah, go touch some grass. Well, let's talk about the guys that are actually going to be on the roster this year. We're going to talk about the offense tonight. We'll talk about the defense next week. But, guys, this is an offense that looks very different than last year. Completely new at running back. Essentially new at wide receiver. Some new faces on the offensive line. And maybe most importantly, a brand new offensive coordinator, something that Brent Pry was not planning on doing for this season. And that's kind of where I want to start tonight. There's been a lot of talk about what Philip Montgomery can do for this team, but I mean, what can fans reasonably expect from a guy that, you know, put up some big numbers as an offensive coordinator, but then when he got to be a head coach, things just didn't really pan out. He's kind of been on the fringe of the sport. I mean, what are your expectations for this guy who's kind of reintroducing himself to college football?
The cop-out answer is something between Baylor and Tulsa. Like, and this is what I mean by that, right? So at Baylor, he had a Heisman Trophy winner in RG3, and everything was predicated off a generational talent at quarterback at the college level. Then there's the Tulsa piece, right? When he became a head coach, where Tulsa's a really hard job. And it's like it's really hard to recruit there. It's really hard to get your guys to play well there. And he lasted longer there than I think a lot of people expected him to when he took that job. So I think it's going to be something between the two, right? Like, do I think the offense could have a higher floor than Tulsa? Yeah, I do. But there's also the piece of you're integrating basically an entirely new offensive line, right? Not saying these guys don't have experience. They do, but some of them do not. I think what helps is that Matt Moore is bringing two guys with him from West Virginia that he's got familiarity with. So that certainly helps. And some of these other guys have played some meaningful snaps at the college level before, the guys that were already here. So that helps, but you're integrating an entirely new receiving core. It's an entirely new running back room. I think what gives you comfort is that Kyron Drones is healthy, right? And Montgomery does have some familiarity with him. Obviously recruited him out of high school, is familiar with his game when he was a high school player in Texas. And Montgomery's been here for a bit now, right? So he's gone through, the spring and the summer, and he's kind of understood what Drones is about. Now, kind of understanding what you got there and being around him every day is one thing, but then making sure that you keep him healthy is another. I think that's what this entire season is going to hinge on, right? And the ceiling for the offense. We can talk about the running backs. There are transfers that are coming in that have played well elsewhere, a receiving core that's largely unproven, but there's certainly some talent in that room. And offensive line that I think almost has to be better because it was so bad last year at times. Like, it almost just has to be better by default. You've turned over too much for it to not look at least different. But I think a lot of it, again, is going to hinge on Drones. And one part of it is you don't want to run him into the ground. But the flip side of that coin is that he does some of his best work when he's mobile. So how do you balance those two? I think it's going to be difficult. So I'm really interested to see what the offense looks like. I think that they are going to commit to more RPO than Bowen did, which I think could be a good thing. Take a little bit of pressure off of the offensive line would be helpful. I'm interested to see what the passing game looks like. I think it's a total question mark.
Yeah.
Drones could be a little healthier. I think that could be good, right? He could be in a better spot with his health. I think he could play better, certainly. But there are so many questions with the pass catchers that that's a big we'll see for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, to Mike's point, a lot of it's going to come and go with the offensive line. And though, you say, oh, like, it couldn't have been much worse. Well, it always could be worse. And granted, like, they've made some additions through the transfer portal, with getting the fellows from West Virginia as a result of more. But, can the younger of the two get in starting right away shape now, right? At the end of the day, right, as bad as last year's offensive line looked, Montavious Cunningham, who the Hokies brought in to be like this plug-and-play guy, he couldn't see the field last year. That's what they thought of him, even with Bob Schick and all those fellas, like, couldn't see the field. And now he's slated in as a starter. So, like, it's hard for me to see just that lone piece of information and be like, we are definitely in so much better shape. Now, again, healthy Drones, to your benefit. Less chemistry on the entire offense. Obviously, you feel that wouldn't be to your benefit. Because even though chemistry can be built quickly, we're talking about being built real quickly here, right? Like the degree to which chemistry was built in 2023 between drones and the receivers and just the offense as a whole, though that made for a great end of the season, that I don't think that would be considered to be quick enough here. We can't be dropping games to Marshall and stuff like that. So, coming off of last year with all the proven talent that they had and all the expectations and the continuity and the experience, and to see what happened, it's hard for me to look at this roster and say, I expect them to be way better. I don't know what I'm getting, but all the signs would lead to you to believe that it's going to be a step back and a slow start. I hope I'm wrong, but in this age of college football, I think the best thing that you can hope is that a lot of your opponents are doing the same thing too, right?
Yeah, I think, Mike, you brought up a good point about the offensive line, about Matt Moore and what kind of impact he can have. One of the biggest issues that Pry had early on in his tenure was the inability of Joe Rudolph and Tyler Bowen to mesh. And the offensive line and the offensive coordinator, they were just not clicking. And that was why Joe Rudolph left after year one, and he got a pretty cozy job at Notre Dame. How does Matt Moore and Philip Montgomery mesh on this offensive line? Is this something that they can coexist on well? And as far as that offensive line goes for the personnel, Laith Ganem, Kyle Altuner, even Johnny Garrett, these are guys that haven't started much at all, if any, in the case of Altuner. Are they ready to be Power 4 offensive linemen? I don't know. And the same can be said for Montavious Cunningham, like Andrew mentioned. This is a guy that basically only saw the field in garbage time or if guys were really banged up. So the offensive line, while I'm happy that they have a guy like Matt Moore in the room and on the sideline to be able to get this group to play better, and Thomas Remack, I think, is going to make a huge difference. And I'm really hopeful that Virginia Tech can get a high level of play out of him like the Mountaineers did last year. But this offensive line, I think, really will determine much of the success that Virginia Tech has this year. Kind of the reason you mentioned, Mike, is that if Kyron Drones is banged up and he's getting beaten up every night, really nothing else matters, because I'm not sure Virginia Tech is all that excited about their backups, especially since they certainly still don't believe in Pop Watson because Garrett Rangel is here and they're duking it out for the backup job anyway. So this is a bit of a Kyron Drones or bust offense. And
way more so than last year.
Yeah, and it's even more concerning when you look at obviously all of the skill players that Virginia Tech lost last year, right? 5 of their top 7 receivers from last year are gone. You've got Aiden Green, who I'll give Andrew credit. Andrew Alex is the only person that has been on the Aiden Green bandwagon from day one, and he was spot on that Aiden Green was able to get snaps as a freshman. But is he ready to be wide receiver 1? And then you're putting Donovan Green next to him, or opposite of him on the other side, that has kind of been an okay player at Wake Forest. Cameron Seldon, you're not really sure what you're going to get out of him. He's a bit of a kind of an unknown. And then after that, it's kind of thin. Like, we don't know if Keelan Adams is going to be healthy. Takai Heath hasn't really shown much and really hasn't been given the opportunity to show much yet. So this is a total question mark on the skill positions. And I specifically remember a game in 2017 where Josh Jackson was playing pretty well against Miami, except for the fact that his receivers couldn't get open. And nothing that Josh or the offensive line did mattered worth a damn. So if those guys aren't able to get open and they're not able to create space and create separation, Kyron can make all the progress in the world, but he's not going to have anybody to throw to. So what they're able to do with this group. Can Fontel get these guys ready to play? I don't know. I certainly hope so. But whenever you lose this many seniors, right? Jalen Lame, Daquan Felton, Stephen Gosnell, it's going to be hard to replace those guys no matter who you bring in or no matter who's waiting in the wings for them.
Yeah, the one thing we mentioned last year, just to kind of build off of the point with drones, is last year we were talking about how important it was for drones to stay healthy. And the reason why we said that was because we thought the offense had quite the ceiling with him healthy because of what we saw at the end of 23 and everything that was coming back. This year it's different. Like he has to stay healthy because there's no other option. Your option is, hoping that Pop Watson would come in and, be comfortable, which we really, I mean, he played well against UVA and he looked uncomfortable in the bowl game, which you just throw away because of personnel. Playing with a bunch of third stringers, it just wasn't a real test, right? He's got to stay healthy because there's no other path, right? And I'm not even talking to be good. There's no other path for a bowl game, in my opinion. Like if Drones is not healthy this year, this team's going to struggle to make a bowl game. I think the defense could be good. And we'll talk about the defense on the defensive preview. I think there's a chance for the defense to take a step forward with all the players they brought in, a lot of productive guys out of the portal. But the real question for me is the offense. And even though you have the more experienced coordinator on the offensive side, I think offense is a bigger question mark for me because I think there are some players on defense that have a lot of really good experience elsewhere. We can't say that about the offense. There's questions on the line. There's question in the receiving core. Really the only certainties that we have right now on the offense are Drones, and even he's a question mark because of his health last year and how he looked when he was banged up, and the running back room, because there are guys in that room who have played well elsewhere. Who's going to emerge is maybe a question. Like who's going to be the guy? Is it going to be, a committee? I think Virginia Tech's going to run the ball okay this year. Like if there was like one thing I had to guess or project, I would say I think Virginia Tech's going to run the ball fine. Like I think this will be a fine running game this year. Will it be Bashal Tootin levels, right? It's hard to replace that guy. Could it take a little bit of a step back but still be serviceable? I think absolutely with the guys they have in the room. But again, I think a lot of it hinges on how the offensive line plays. So I'm way more concerned about Virginia Tech's offense than I am about the defense. And defense has the more inexperienced coordinator. So that's kind of how that works. That's how I feel about it anyway.
It's just an interesting position to be in, right? Knowing that, like, you look at any young, talented player on the roster and how that player projects forward. It's like, really, for this regime, what matters is right now. Because in this day and age of college football, like, if Pry is gone, the entire thing is in all likelihood blown up. Like, any sense of continuity, and we know that even, with continuity at head coach is still going to leave questions, but you're basically starting from scratch if Pry is done. And that's why you can look at some of these guys that have transferred in and say, oh, well, if you give me a year to develop, well, there has to be a year on a winning team, or else, again, the odds of that player being there here, we're talking the 2026 roster 365 days from now, is minimal. So it gives you in a sport that used to be so defined by recruit and develop, like the immense pressure to get it done right now today, or else the entire thing is screwed, is something new. I'll tell you that much. And I guess we kind of went through it with Fuente. That was a combination of a couple of things, but it's even more pronounced today than it was just 3-4 years ago when we went through it the last time.
Sure is. Last thing I have as far as the offense goes, and I want to make this a little bit more difficult by saying you're not allowed to pick Kyron Drones for this answer. Who is the most important player on this offense for this season?
Cunningham.
Why?
I think a lot of it's because of what Andrew mentioned, right? He is being relied upon to be a key cog on the offensive line. He couldn't even see the field last year on a bad offensive line. And now he's got to step in and be a really, really important piece to a revamped line with a new coach. And he was the one offensive lineman last cycle that Virginia Tech really targeted out of the portal. And then I think we all were kind of a bit surprised that when news started dropping out of fall camp, Cunningham wasn't really getting any run. We're like, wait a minute. This is an offensive line that needed depth. They also needed some guys that could step in and potentially start. He wasn't going to do any of those things. It's like, okay. And now he's got to step in and be a starter. Like, he is one of the guys on their best 5. Like, he's been named since spring as a starter. Kyron Drones mentioned it at ACC kickoff. Like, he's healthy. He's going to be out there. I think offensive line is so key this year. And if you're going to name somebody other than Kyron Drones, the guy I'm picking is Cunningham, because he did come in with expectations out of the portal and then didn't play. And now he's got to be really important. So he's my pick. You could pick anybody in the receiving room, though, but Cunningham's my pick.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I would honestly, I mean, you could rephrase what you said in Cunningham as a question, right? And one of the biggest questions is how formidable is, the least talented guy on the offensive line starting, and then the rotational backup that will come in, to spell guys or for injuries or what have you. Because if those two guys are like far below, replacement level talent in the conference, like, this team is totally screwed. So that's a great question to ask, Mike. And we'll find out quickly against a heck of a team in South Carolina, just how outmatched these guys might be, or lack thereof. Because, obviously it is college football. Players can actually make big steps from year to year. Just kind of a matter of the aging through the system, especially now that we don't have as many like 7th year COVID guys. Most of those guys have exhausted their eligibility. It's going to become a situation where we're seeing more progression. And by the way, I think this is a thing across college sports right now, is that because a certain generation of players stayed for so long, there's a lot of younger guys that are getting their first run here in a way that we weren't necessarily seeing over the course of the last few years. So I think that's an observation, but it's interesting. And to that point, I guess the question that I would ask, and as Mike says, it could be anyone in the receiver room, can any of these guys, Green is who I think we'd all highlight, Aiden Green, Donovan Green, I guess, too, if he could take a big step forward. But can Virginia Tech find a legitimate number 1 wide receiver? Because, you have 3-4 guys from last year's receiving core that, were anywhere between drafted on practice squads, we're currently going to be on, we're going to end up in training camps to practice squads, what have you. Extremely talented room. So maybe Aiden Green was, ready for something of the spotlight last year more than he received, but he didn't, because he was drowned out in the roster full of talent. But he stayed for the chance to be the number 1. Can he be that guy right now, or can somebody else step up? Because that's an incredibly important question.
This is disrespectful to Aiden Green because he's a better player. But doesn't this feel like Caleb Smith, like Pry's first year? Doesn't it feel like that a lot? And Aiden Green's a much better player than Caleb, and I like Caleb Smith. Like, go back. We got plenty of podcast content where we all praised Caleb Smith for his role, but we were all like, are we really comfortable with Caleb Smith being the number 1 in this offense at receiver? We all talked about that, right?
Yep.
I'm having the same sort of questions about Aiden Green. Not to say he can't be that guy. He's very talented. He's very fast. But is he ready for that role? We're having the same kind of conversation. Like, are we absolutely sure he is ready for that role?
Well, here's the thing, right? If Aiden Green can take that step forward, it's going to be the first time in a long time that a receiver at Virginia Tech has come through the program and then kind of really emerged later in his career. Isaiah, Cam, starting freshman good right away, and you kind of just saw them get better as time went on into those junior and senior seasons for them. But they were obviously big recruits coming in that made impacts right away. Obviously some of these other guys, you look at like Jalen Lane, what have you, even Hazleton transferred in. Trey Turner, freshman, was playing right away, and he kind of developed through it. This is going to be the first like almost blind test of how are you developing behind the scenes over the course of the last 2 years. So
that's a really good point. A really good thought exercise too, because like I'm struggling to think of a receiver who like sat for a while, emerged late. Willie Byrne, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm like sitting here answering my own question. Willie Byrne might be a comp, but like I'm trying to think of a guy who like sat then emerged. Like Willie sat behind Danny Cole. Like Danny Cole was a senior. I think Willie was a freshman just starting at Tech and was like buried on the depth chart. CJ Carroll, maybe. We're going way back.
Yeah, and I mean, even at that, I would say that Aiden Green is probably, almost certainly the highest touted recruit that came in that decided to sit back and wait for a while at Virginia Tech.
For sure.
Like the reality is the guys who, come in with that high of expectations and are, would be given the keys to the hot rod the next year, tend to say, no, I'm just going to go play somewhere else. So, I mean, good on Virginia Tech for keeping him. We'll see what dividends that pays here. He obviously showed a ton of promise last year, but it's going to need to be a pretty monumental step forward.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm still stuck on this. I'm going like way back in my mind, but like my freshman year, like was 2011. The receiving core that year, it was Boykin, Danny Cole, DJ Coles, Marcus Davis, Dyrell Roberts, I think was the 5. Like all those guys had been playing a while.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's like that back when Tech had like 5 receivers to throw to. Now it's just like, all right, can we find a couple? Man, it's a killer.
So my X factor for this season is going to be a guy I don't think we've actually mentioned yet, which is kind of surprising. Benji Gosnell. He's the best pass catcher that's returning from last year. Had some moderate hype coming out of high school. I think some folks thought he had a relatively high ceiling. He's in a position that can obviously be a safety blanket for a quarterback. He's got good athleticism. He's got a good frame. He's tough. He can contribute in the run game. I think if Gosnell can take that next step to be not necessarily an elite tight end, but a very good one, that's a game changer for Philip Montgomery in this offense. It really can open things up if you have a tight end that you can rely on. And given his experience, I think he's the guy that's best suited to maybe be that number one option as a receiver, even though he's not playing the position. And, Virginia Tech still needs those weapons on the outside. They really need Aiden Green and Donovan Green and Cameron Selden and those guys to step up and stretch the field. But when push comes to shove, those quarterbacks oftentimes are looking for those tight ends. That's how the game is. Can Benji Gosnell be that guy? Can he be a guy who, I think he caught 32 passes last year? Can he catch 50 this year? Can he catch 55? Can he find a way to get 800 yards receiving, something like that? I think that will go a long way in getting this offense off the ground and open things up, both throwing it to the outsides or even just running it. I think Benji's really, really important, and hopefully he can stay healthy and hopefully he's ready to take that next step that I think a lot of people in that building think is there. I think people still believe that he's got some potential that he's yet to tap.
And he's a high potential guy, and I bet you a part of a lot of why he stayed, family ties play into it. I'm sure he loves it there, but he knows he's going to be a feature in this offense in a way that I think for a tight end, you could shop around, but you're not going to find as many good opportunities to really be a star as Benji Gosnell has in front of him in 2025 at Virginia Tech. Likely.
Yeah.
It's a good pick, Rick. That's a good one.
Hopefully he can be that guy. Anything else before we wrap this up, boys? Talking about the offense.
Nice, tidy 49-minute podcast.
Hey. Is your next engagement ready to go, or is that not happening?
ready to go, and my wife's calling me. So please hold. trying to get my kid to bed. One
Well, in
moment.
that case, let's just end it there.
Yeah, I would say
If you're in Blacksburg, Count's
I'll go on
Family
mute.
Pharmacy is the place to be. Mike, we'll see you later. Get ready for the season at Home Field Apparel. Make sure you use the discount code in the description, Beamerball, 15% off your first order online. Andrew, any last words before we get out of here?
no, just that it's rapidly approaching. Travel plans are being made. It's exciting, but for all the reasons that we're saying, extremely nerve-wracking. Should be fun to watch one way or the other. We got a lot ahead of us, boys.
Yeah, hopefully it's more fun to watch than this frozen frame of Mike McDaniel right now.
Jesus.
Like I said,
also the other thing I have to say, Rod Stewart, tremendous in concert.
Oh yes,
he was
right.
fantastic. I mean, for 80 years old, he is still rocking it. It is crazy. So God bless him.
Man, if you find something you love, you never have to work a day in your life. Rate, review, subscribe as always. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we're going live. Hopefully, we'll be able to go live for the next episode. We're able to do that for this one. We'll be back next week. Talk about this defense. Tons of new names, especially in the secondary, defensive line. Lots of new faces, new defensive coordinators. So we got plenty to discuss there. And then we'll be back shortly after that with our season preview, Andrew. It's that time of the year. Take care, folks. We'll see you next time. Until then, go Hokies.